Hello, everyone. If you've ever been to chess.com, you've probably seen the Puzzle Rush. Maybe you wondered what it is, maybe you've tried it out. Um, but today I'm going to show you some things that will help you beat your high score if you've done it already, or beat your friends' high scores if you haven't. So, first of all, what is Puzzle Rush? Well, Puzzle Rush is a um, feature on chess.com where it will show you a puzzle, and um, once you solve it, will immediately show you a slightly harder puzzle, and it will go on until you miss three different puzzles. Um, there's You can do it where you have a 3 minute time limit, a 5 minute time limit, and no time limit. Now, I've done a lot of Puzzle Rush in the past, and I started to notice there's a lot of patterns, especially in the earlier puzzles. Once it gets to the later puzzles, there's not as much patterns to notice because the puzzles get harder and it requires a lot more calculation. But for the earlier puzzles, um, there's some pretty interesting numbers here. So what I did is I went through um, 20 I went through Puzzle Rush 10 different times and counted up the number of times I noticed certain things. So, um, for example, how many times in the first 20 puzzles is the correct answer to give a check as the first move? And I found that to be 88%. So, in 88% of the puzzles, in the first 20 puzzles of Puzzle Rush, on average, the correct answer involves giving a check. So that, first of all, should tell you a lot. Especially in the earlier phases of Puzzle Rush, you should be looking for checks. Um, Back rank checkmates. And if you don't know what that means, I'll show you. There will definitely be a lot of these. There's especially a lot in the first 10 puzzles. But even just in the first 20, there is about 32% of the time the puzzle involves giving a back rank checkmate. Um, Now, this is something else I noticed is whenever there's a queen on the board, for whenever you have a queen on the board, um, how much or what percentage of the time is the correct answer to move the queen? And that is 80% of the time the correct answer is to move the queen first. So whenever I'm doing Puzzle Rush and I'm trying to go fast, especially in the 3 minute or 5 minute time control, uh, whenever the puzzle loads up, if I see that I have a queen, I'll click on the queen and then look to see if I have any checks because, you know, 80% of the uh, 80% of the time you got to move the queen first, and 88% of the time it's a check first. So it's a pretty high likelihood in the first 20 puzzles that it's going to be that move. Um, Finally, the amount of times that the queen delivers a checkmate in the first 20 puzzles is about 64% of the time. Um, so those are just the numbers that I found after doing some tests and counting all the times this happened. Now let's go to an actual puzzle rush, and I'll try to go through it. I'll explain each of the puzzles as best I can, and we'll see how far I can go. So this is I think it's called Survive time control, where it's unlimited time. I didn't want to feel rushed and not be able to explain things. So, um, this first puzzle, whenever you see the pawns like this in front of the king, your your brain should immediately go to, well, this is probably going to be a back rank checkmate. Back rank because the king is on this back rank, and oh, just a second. All right, sorry about that. My light died again. That happens sometimes. Okay, um, so what was I saying? When the king is here on the back rank, and there's pawns in front of it, your mind should immediately start going to, well, is there any way we can deliver back rank checkmate? The other thing too is, what are the checks I have in this position? That's just a general thing for Puzzle Rush. And so with this, um, well, I can see, look, I have this rook, and if I take this rook, it's actually going to be a checkmate. So that's it. Um, oh wow, this is a really uncommon case where uh, the solution Man, this is a hard one for level 2. I think the solution is g takes f4. This is really uncommon. Usually they're not like some endgame like this that doesn't involve giving a check or a checkmate first, but there's that, 12% that's not a check first. Because the problem is if you take king takes e4, then black is going to push the pawn, and it looks like it's pretty hard to stop, and we're not threatening anything. And if we take this pawn, then we're doing good, and we're going to take that pawn. That was a really hard puzzle for 232. That's really unusual. This one, for example, okay, well, black's king's on the back rank. We should immediately think, is there a back rank checkmate here? Because not only is black's king on the back rank, but the king has no moves forward, right? Because our king is stopping these two moves, and then the pawn is here. So we have this rook too, and this check is actually going to be a checkmate in a couple turns. This is actually something too, is when you're trying to go fast in Puzzle Rush, in a lot of cases, the Puzzle Rush will force you to play to checkmate. So like the computer would, computer playing this would, a human would probably just resign, but a computer playing this would like block with every piece that's available until checkmate. So what I'll do sometimes in Puzzle Rush is I'll see, well, these rooks will be able to block my checkmate. So when I bring my rook down, I'll drop it, and then I'll oh, that's kind of weird. It went right to what the position is now. But I'll drag my rook, I'll drop it, and immediately click on it again, so I'm ready to click the next spot as fast as possible, right? Not wasting any time. All right, king is once again on the back rank with pawns in front of him. Also, I see that I have a queen. Let's move the queen, and we have this checkmate that actually is also taking the queen. So that was an awful move by white if that was an actual game. Okay, like I said, these first 10 puzzles are almost all just back rank checkmates. So here it is again. Nothing can block, and that's checkmate. All right, we have a queen. Do we have any checks with the queen? We do, right here, g2, and that is also checkmate. Bishop defends back there. So, and once again, like, I'm telling you, it's seriously, I'm surprised the numbers were not higher in the amount of times that, whenever there's a queen, you just move the queen first and it's a checkmate. We see the same sort of thing. This is actually kind of also a little bit of a back rank mate too, because the king can't move forward anywhere. So that's a nice puzzle. Once again, we have a queen. There's a lot of these like that's actually the same exact pattern as the last puzzle. That's kind of funny, just flipped on the different side. We have a queen. Let's see if we have any checks. We can move the queen to h5, which would be a check, and this is just kind of a general thing to know, a general pattern for the opening is if your opponent's king is in the middle of the board and they've moved their f and g pawns, and you can deliver a check on the side of the board with your queen, it's almost always good, especially if black can't do anything other than move the king. And in that case, I think it was actually going to lead to checkmate. Yeah, checkmate in the next turn. Okay, we see the black king can't move forward. Do we have any checks on the back rank with our queen as well, which we have? Yes, we do. And that's an unusual case where usually black would like block with a couple of pieces, the bishop and the rook, but this time they did not. So, okay, we have a queen. Let's see if we have any safe checks with the queen. Obviously, something like, queen d3 isn't good because this pawn can just take. But we have this check right here. And if you just look at that really quickly, you can see the pawn guards that square, and the king can't move anywhere, so it's checkmate. Okay, this is another common pattern. I guess it's not as common. This is actually something from, I believe, the book Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess. It's the first chess book I ever got back when I was a little kid, and it has some really good puzzles and tactics in it. I don't think it was actually written by Bobby Fischer though, which is kind of sad. I always thought it was. But one of the topics in that book is giving a check to force the king away from being a defender of the back rank. So what that means is right now we would like to give a back rank checkmate, but white is defending this square twice, right? Once with the rook and once with the king. So, if we had another rook on f8, then we could actually sacrifice our queen on f1 because white would recapture and we would recapture and the rook would be defended, and so it would be a checkmate. But because we don't have that, that's not checkmate. But what we can do is we can move our queen to f2, give this check and force the king away, and now the only thing guarding the back rank is this rook. So now we can sacrifice the queen, and it's a back rank checkmate. So that's a nice pattern to know. And yeah. All right, let's see. This one, I'm not seeing any obvious checks or obvious good moves with the queen. So this one's going to be just a tactic. Um, Now, I don't know what's like the best way to think about stuff like this. The When you're trying to see tactics in a position, whether it's doing a puzzle or just looking for tactic you can do in your game, um, the things you should look out for are pieces that are either not defended or weakly defended, and also ways that you can attack the queen because of the queen's value. Right? If you attack the queen with like a bishop or a knight or a pawn or even a rook, the other person is most likely forced to respond to that move. And, maybe there's some tactic involved with that. So in this position, we can look and say, well, the rooks are well defended. The bishop is not defended by anything, but, there's nothing that we can really do to attack it. We're not close to being able to take it. Now we look at, well, the queen is kind of out in the middle of the board a little bit by white and kind of cut off a little bit. Like this bishop is stopping the queen from moving in these two squares. The pawns are stopping these two squares. So the queen doesn't have a whole lot of moves. And we also see that the queen is the only defender of this knight. So the answer to this puzzle is actually to move the bishop here to b5. Because what that does is it creates an attack on the queen, and you see white is forced to move the queen away, or else you'd lose the queen. And now, because the queen was the only defender of this knight, and she is now moved away, we can take the knight for free. Now, the really important thing with this puzzle is and it's kind of a crazy thing too, is if this pawn was on a6 or not here at all, then this wouldn't work actually, because white would be able to move the queen to d4 and create an attack on our queen, right? So then if we took the knight, then white would take our queen. This is if, of course, like we don't have this pawn guarding our queen. So if our queen was undefended and white could attack our undefended queen while also being defended by the knight, right? If you can picture that, maybe it's a little tricky, but right, if we attack the queen moved down, and our queen was undefended, we can't take this queen because then the knight would take us. I mean, we can, it would just be an equal trade, but it's not going to win us a piece. And if we take the knight, then we get our queen taken. But in this case, because our queen is protected, we can take this free knight, and then after the queen takes, we just take back with the pawn, and now we're up a knight. Okay, what to move here now? Once again, I'm going to be looking for any checks. Something too is if you ever have a bishop that's on the opposite color as a king, it's impossible to give a check for, right? Because, well, the white bishop can never attack a dark square, the light squared bishop, that is. So, anyways, I can ignore this piece for a check, looking for checks, and then just look at the rook. So do we have any checks? Well, the only check we have is to b3, and the problem with that move is that black will just take our rook. So this puzzle is not going to be about a check, but the important thing is to just be mindful of checks in every position, even if it's not actually a good check. Just being able to see where you have checks, because maybe this would be a good check in a different situation. But here, well, if you just look for a second more, you see, well, this rook is now just completely free, and our bishop can take it, and it's not a stalemate. That's another important thing. Right? This king has one move, so black has one legal move after we take this rook, which is king e2, and so we get the rook. Okay, this one is similar to one of the puzzles earlier, except we don't end up sacrificing the queen, but we are going to give this check, right? We have a queen, we can give a safe check close to the king, and the next move, actually, let me go back to that. Oh, maybe that won't work. I don't know if that messes up whatever I've clipped, but we gave that check. The king was going to be forced to the corner, and our knight was defending this square, so we could checkmate on that square. Okay, well, once again, do we have any good checks with the queen? We do have queen e6, which is at least safe for now, right? The queen can be taken. So the nice thing with these early puzzles is that they're very forced, meaning there's not a whole lot of other moves that black has. So, for example, we can calculate, well, if we go queen here, black is forced to move the king back to e8. So that's completely forced. There's no other move. Then, is there anything else, any other checks that we have? And the solution to this one is a little bit harder to see if you've not seen this pattern before, but we see that our rooks would then be looking at each other if we went down here, right? Queen here, king here. Our rooks can now see each other, and so if I take this rook, well, the black bishop can't recapture because it's pinned to the king. That's kind of there's a lot of visualization. That's why puzzles are pretty good to do for your chess skill, is because it requires a lot of visualization without actually just like playing out the moves. You have to picture what the position will look like. So it is kind of hard to see if I move the queen here, king here. Now the rooks are open, and if I take this rook, the bishop can't recapture because it's pinned, and the king would then be forced onto the square. And with our queen and our knight, we should be able to give a checkmate there. So it's just a nice little 3-move checkmate. I would say it's fairly easy to spot once you look for checks and once you can visualize what the position will look like, because everything is forced, like I said. The only move for black was to move the king back, and then once you take the rook, the only move is to take the rook, and then you have that checkmate on f7. So here, I see black just took our pawn with that pawn on e5, and there's not really a threat to this move that we need to be worried about in this position. There's no checks that I see. The queen doesn't really seem to have any moves that do anything useful. So because we've gone through that checklist of what to look for, we can start just looking for other things. And if we do that, we'll see that, well, black has left this bishop completely undefended. Sometimes these, especially earlier puzzles, will just have some random hanging piece and you just have to take the free piece. And this is, okay, this is maybe the harder part of the puzzle, is sometimes the puzzles will force you to play out a sequence just to prove that you, I guess, have seen all the variations that can happen. So like here, it's like, so what is the right move? Our bishop is under attack. We currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares that we can move the bishop to. Oh, wait. What am I saying? I don't know why I thought this pawn was defended more. We can just take this pawn. So now the question is, what do we want to take it with? Now, I'm kind of leaning towards the knight, because if we take it with our knight... Oh, yes, that's definitely correct. Because if we take it with our knight, we're creating this attack on the queen and forking the queen and the rook. Or sorry, the queen and the bishop. And now that black has pushed this pawn down, the queen is defending this bishop, so if black were to take our pawn with their pawn, now the bishop is defended and attacking our queen. It maybe isn't terrible, but it just looks a little scary. So I think, I mean, unless I'm totally missing something, I mean, it can't be wrong, right? We take, if the rook takes, we just take the rook, and now we're up in exchange. So yeah, okay. If that was not right, I'd be very, very confused. And this is the other thing about puzzle rushes. Sometimes like that puzzle was fairly difficult, I would say, to just make sure that it was like all correct. And then the very next puzzle, we just get a 1-move back rank checkmate. So sometimes the puzzles feel very out of place in the earlier stages. Okay, so this puzzle, we can scan really quick and see we have no checks right now. We have no free pieces we can capture. The only ways that we can attack the queen are like, c4, but that just loses a pawn because now the d3 pawn would be hanging. So there's no easy way to attack the queen. Um, there's not really, there's no forks I can see with our knight. So now we just need to start thinking about, like, well, what would we want? What would be the best case scenario for this situation? Currently in this position, if we can kind of get the sense that Black's king is not very safe, right? This pawn on g6 has been moved away. There's now this hole in Black's defenses. And on top of that, our knight is close to the king, and kind of the major pieces are far away, the queen and the rooks. They're not really able to defend the king. So now we start thinking, well, hey, if we had a queen on h7, it would be checkmate, right? Well, is there a way to perhaps threaten to move our queen to h7? We could move our queen to e4, but the problem with that is that white just takes. Black just takes our queen with his queen. And we are currently down a rook, so we can't afford a queen trade in this position. Well, especially if you just noticed this previous move of pawn takes bishop, then it should be fairly clear that, oh, we can move our queen to h5 and threaten queen h7. And actually, in that situation, there's no move that Black can make to defend h7. So it's a forced checkmate. That one's I would say a little trickier to see, but definitely findable. Okay, so this puzzle, immediately, this comes from a long time of playing chess and just a lot of pattern recognition. Immediately, when I see this open king that is on the same line as a queen that has just a bishop blocking it, I'm just immediately looking for a bishop move that has a discovered check. I would say the most powerful move in chess, other than checkmate, is a double check. A double check is where you move a piece which uncovers a check, and the piece that just moved also gives a check. The reason why it's so powerful is because your opponent can't respond to either check other than just moving the king out of both checks. So there's certain situations where you can give a double check and there's nowhere for the king to move, even if both of your pieces can be taken, even if other pieces can block both pieces, right? Normally that can be a way to get out of checkmate, but if it's a double check, you can't. So that's like the most powerful move. I would say like maybe the second most powerful tactic is a discovered check, which is kind of a step down from a double check. It's just you move a piece away and give a check with a different piece. The reason why it's so powerful is that you can move your piece anywhere and create some threat because your opponent has to respond to the check first, if that makes sense. So for this puzzle, right, I think the correct answer is bishop to c4 check, right? Check with the queen. Because we see immediately, well, check, and there's no squares for the king to move. So now, white would have to block the check with the queen. And the only way to block that is, well, there's two. You can either move the queen or you can move the knight. I guess you could move the knight here. Obviously, if you move the knight here, the queen just takes. If you block with the queen, now our bishop that's on c4 just just captures the queen. So the only move after bishop c4 for white is knight to e2, right? And then what we start noticing is, hey, that knight was the only defender of this bishop on b5, which would now be under attack from a bishop on c4, right? So here we check. The knight has to block or else white would lose a ton of material. And now we take the free bishop. So that was a nice little tactic. Okay. With this puzzle, we look at our queen. Do we have any queen checks? We do actually. Queen to f4 is a check. And we can see that the white king doesn't have a whole lot of room to move, right? He can't go backwards. So if the king was to move to h3, well, picture that. Queen here, king is on h3. The queen is kind of forming this little cage around the king, especially with this pawn on g2. The king has no legal moves, so rook h1 is checkmate. Now, we do have to be careful, though. After check, you got to make sure you look at all the possible moves that your opponent has. White can play g3, right? But this isn't a problem because we can actually just move back. So I'll show this out. I think it'll play through. Yeah. So G3. Then you just have to see, well, we can just move right back. And now that this G pawn is gone, our queen and our rook kind of almost like a ladder mate just form this little, I don't know what you'd call it, just this box that the king has to move down. And it's a similar situation. The king has no moves. Rook H1 is checkmate. Okay. So this one is going to be a tactic called removing the guard. We see if we were to play queen to d6 right now, that's a check, and it actually also forks the king and the rook. The problem is that this knight on f5 is guarding d6. So here, queen d6 would not be great. White would just take our free queen. So is there some move we can use to get rid of this knight? Well, yes, there is. We can just take it. Even though our rook will be taken, right? We get a knight, black gets a rook, we get a pawn, and then we get another rook. So we got a pawn, a rook, and a knight. Sorry, we got a pawn, yes, a pawn, a rook, and a knight, and black got a knight. Wow, I'm messing this up so bad. We got a pawn, a rook, and a knight, and black got a rook. So obviously that's a very good trade for us. Okay. Well, this is kind of a crazy opening. I have no idea what this would come from. Our bishop's under attack. The knight is forking the queen and the rook, but it's also under attack from our king. I think I see the right move, but this is kind of wacky. Sometimes with puzzles, one of the ways to try to find the right move is just to count the material, because a puzzle, at least in the earlier stages, but even into, I'd say, like the 50s and 60s, it's always going to like have you be up some material or have some checkmate threat that the opponent can't stop. If you make a move in a puzzle and it doesn't force you to have either of those things, then it's probably not the right move. So here, the material is, well, we have the same minor pieces, we have the same, rooks and queens. So then pawns, we've got 4, black has, what is that? Sorry, we've got 4 here and 2 here. Black has 3 here and 4 there. So black is up a pawn here, right? Oh yes, that's of course, because in this puzzle, black just barely took our pawn with the knight. So I think the idea is that if we take this knight with our king, black can capture our bishop and then be up a pawn. So with that in mind, I think I think I see the move, but I'm just trying to see if that's everything to it. Oh. Like sometimes in a puzzle you'll see some move that looks okay, but you're not sure if it's actually the best. Because I'm thinking, what if we play bishop takes f7? Because the king can't take us, okay? Because that move opens up this attack on the queen. And the king is the only defender of black's queen, so if we played bishop f7, I think that's the right move, so I'm just going to do it. Okay, right, so black can't take us because then we just take the queen. So black's forced down there. Now, unfortunately, like if we had some dark squared bishop that could give another check, then this would just be totally crushing. We don't have that though. So I'm thinking the right move is probably trading queens, because then black's king isn't attacking our bishop, and then we can take the knight. Oh right, and then we're just up a piece, right? Yeah, because we got the knight and black didn't get the bishop. Wow, once again, like, sometimes there will be kind of some harder puzzles to work through, and then there will just be like a checkmate in one. It's just queen f2 and the king has no moves. Wow. Okay. Do we have any good checks with our queen? Well, we have queen to e5. The problem is that black can just guard with the queen, and I don't really see a good way to continue. That might not even be the best move, but it's just not very. It just doesn't look like the right move in a puzzle. I don't know if that makes sense. Sometimes it just kind of requires some experience. We can look at other checks though, right? What about rook e7? If we play rook e7, now the king only has 2 legal moves, right? King f6 and king h8, or king h6, because our queen and knight stop these squares. And actually, in both of those cases, so I'm going to play this. This is the right move. In both of the cases, it didn't even go through it because in either move, there was a nice pattern. It's a common pattern with a pawn, a knight, and a rook that can deliver a checkmate like that in a lot of cases. Okay. Once again, we have a queen. Let's see if we have any good checks with the queen. We could check on e7, but then either of these pieces can block, and I don't really see a good way forward after that. What about on d6? Well, d6 is a nice square because the queen is guarded, and because she's right next to the king, you can't block if the piece is right next to you, obviously, and so you'd have to move. But in this case, Black's king has no moves here and can't move here because our hero knight over here is stopping the king from running away. So that is checkmate. Nice. Okay. I think this is going to be another checkmate threat one because we see the king has no legal moves right now, but because all we have is our queen that's kind of right by the king, the queen can't do anything, not anything, but the queen can't do everything just by herself, right? There's none of these checks would do anything useful. So I think the correct move here is knight to g4. And the reason for that is it actually creates two threats at the same time. We are creating the threat of queen to f2 checkmate, and also knight takes h2 checkmate, because the king has no legal moves, right? Yeah, so it didn't even play it out. Okay. Something else that I saw, the endgame puzzles like king and pawn are much less common in Puzzle Rush, but something I noticed is whenever there's a endgame like this with just king and pawns left, you either have a passed pawn and you just need to push it for the answer, or you need to create a passed pawn. And basically, put simply, a passed pawn is a pawn that has no enemy pawns in front or in front to the sides of that pawn. So, for example, white's c4 pawn is passed because we don't have any pawns, anywhere in front of it, either directly in front of it or off to the side. The reason why it's called passed is because the pawn can just keep moving and there's no pawns that will stop it. If we had a pawn on d7, well, the pawn can move here, but then we would just take it. So it's not passed. For example, our f4 pawn is not passed even though there's no pawns in front of it because this g2 pawn would just capture us. So we need to do what's called creating a breakthrough. What that means is, well, if we push f3 right now, white will just take us, and we can't take back with anything, so that's just not good. So we're going to prepare that move with g4, because now when we play f3, after white takes us, we can take back with a pawn, and now we've created a passed pawn that we can push to become a queen. The important thing about this, too, is if white tries to create a queen as well, our king is in time to stop the pawn, or at least... hold on, takes. If here... Oh, that's actually kind of funny. I thought that was actually correct what I just said, but that's wrong. Because if we try to stop the pawn, white's king comes in and defends the square, and we actually lose. Because now white's king is... Sorry, I don't know if that makes sense. If we... sorry, okay. We just barely took this pawn on f3. Now, in the actual puzzle, white just moved the king, that's not even, I don't know, that doesn't try to do anything, I think, because now we can just push and make a queen. But the point was, here, if white wanted to make a queen, at first I thought, well, our king is close enough to get into the square so that we can stop the pawn, right? Because if here, we can move the king here, there, and it's like, oh, and we're in time to stop the pawn. But the problem with that move is that once we get down to this position, right, the pawn on c7 and the king on d7, white actually moves their king to b7. So now we can't take the pawn, and white is defending the promotion square. So white would promote into a queen and win. So if white pushed, the correct answer is to push as well. And the reason for that is white would push, and then we would push our pawn, promote into a queen, and it's check. That's the important thing. If it wasn't check, this would probably be a draw, right? But this puzzle goes king there, and then we push the pawn, and of course create a queen, and that's the answer. Okay, white to move. Once again, this is going to be one of those puzzles where we have to push a passed pawn. Now, in this case, all of our pawns are actually passed. So now the question becomes, which one do we push? Well, obviously, this one is stopped by the king, so that one doesn't do anything for us. And we do need to be careful because black is 1, 2, 3, 4 moves away from queening himself. And our king, in this case, is way too far away to get to the pawn. So, with that in mind, I think, well, we need to come up with an answer that is quicker than black promoting with the queen. So if we push this f pawn to f4, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So black would queen right there. But if that's the case, then we would queen too, and it's actually a check, and that's just winning for us. So I think this is the correct move, right? Anything else is just 1, 2, 3, 4, but then black queens with check. So yeah, I think this is right. And if the black king had moved instead of pushing the pawn to a2, then we would move our king up, and one of these pawns would then promote. So that's a nice puzzle. Okay. Okay, this one's a little cluttered. There's a lot of pieces in the middle. There's a lot going on, so it's maybe a little tricky to evaluate. But what I see is these pieces in the center. If our pawn was to be moved to d4 safely, it would actually be a fork, right? Now, currently, if we took this pawn with our pawn, white would be able to recapture with the knight, and then we would take, and then white would take, and we just don't get anything from that. So this is another removing the defender puzzle, I guess. We have to take this knight first, then when we take, there's no knight to recapture, so we forked the pieces, and now we get one of the pieces. Important that, you know, there's nothing down here because we're defending it well enough. So there we go. All right, and we're already on 31, so I don't know if you've done Puzzle Rush before. I don't know what your high score is, but yeah, it's actually not too difficult to get into the higher numbers. My high score is like 64, I think, but all right. Oh, this is a cool one. This is cool. We're starting to get into the territory where these puzzles are a lot harder, I would say. What I see is this bishop could be giving a check if this pawn wasn't here. And actually, if we could just take this pawn off of the board, or say that you were allowed to just eat your own pieces in chess, if we could take our own pawn, it would be checkmate. The knight would block. Okay, so you know, if we could take our own pawn, then the knight would block, and then we would just take the knight with our bishop, defended by the queen. The king has no legal moves. That's a really cool checkmate. But because we can't take our own pawn, is there some way we can push it? Well, currently no, because this bishop is blocking it. But what that means is, well, this bishop can't really move, because if it moves, then we would push the pawn, and we get this check that we really want. So with that in mind, it looks to me like the correct answer is actually knight e6. Now this, I mean, we're starting to get into the territory where I could think something is the right move, and it ends up not being the right move, but yeah, so we check with the knight, the bishop takes, and now we can check. And the nice thing about this is the pawn now actually guards the square that the knight used to be guarding. So black can block with a couple pieces, but it's just a checkmate. Okay. Well, once again, I'm not seeing anything immediately obvious. Now, we can give this check on g2 with the rook. The king would be forced to h3. And I'm sure that that's good. Oh, in fact, I see what the follow-up is. I was looking for the follow-up. I think the follow-up is h5. Not h4. That's illegal. There, h5, because we're threatening to take and actually checkmate. So white would be forced to take us first. Then we would recapture with our king, and there's nothing white can do to stop us from checkmating with our pawn. Yeah, so this is... Oh, okay, this is tricky. This is why you can't just be on autopilot with puzzles, because man, the puzzle rush will do some stuff. It's like humans would never do this. They would just play some other move or resign. This is so tricky because if we had just like pre-moved or made this move really quick, we would have lost our own rook. Uh, we just have to take this pawn, and now this checkmate is unstoppable, and our rook is defended. I almost just messed up because I was going too fast. Okay. Also, this is kind of getting a little long. I don't want it to be too long, but hopefully this is helpful for someone. Um, this is actually another pattern, this puzzle, from the Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, where we can take this pawn on f7 with our queen, because the rook is forced to take, right? Otherwise, the only other move is king back, but then this is just a back rank checkmate. So the rook is basically forced to capture, but now, because our bishop is pinning the rook, it acts just kind of like a pawn in a back rank. So if you think about it like that, well, now we just have a back rank checkmate. So that's a pretty nice pattern. Okay, with this one, I think it's pretty clear that the only way to really have an advantage is to push our passed pawn, right? Any king move doesn't make sense. Time is of the essence in the endgame, and we can't sit here wasting moves with our king. Now, this is a I just really said we can't waste moves with our king. This isn't really a waste of moves, though, because it's very necessary. If we just keep pushing our pawn, well, black's king is going to get there in time to stop it. So we need to shoulder the black king with our king, right? We just cut the king off from stopping our pawn, and now we're able to promote. Oh, and this is a nice pattern. You promote at the same time. This would normally be a draw, but there's a few cases where the alignment of the king and the queen allows us to win. So here we can give this check, and the puzzle stopped right there. That's unfortunate. We give the check. The king is forced over, and then we give another check, and it skewers the king and the queen. A skewer is where you attack a piece that has greater value than a piece behind it. So the piece with greater value would move, and then you could take the piece with lesser value behind it, right? The king is the most, he's not the most powerful piece, but he's the most valuable piece because, if you lose him, you lose. Um, so anyways, let's see. Okay. Well, this one is not exactly clear right away. Obviously, black is up a lot of material. A rook and like 3 pawns. And also this pawn is 3 squares away from becoming a queen. It's not looking too good for us. Other than the fact that black's king is kind of weak. Oh, this is a nice one. So, if we look at checks first, and we see the queen check doesn't do anything. If we had a knight that could jump to f7, then this would be a great move, because the rook would be forced to take, and our knight would checkmate the king. That's actually called a smothered mate, because the king is just smothered by his own pieces. But because we don't have any knights to do that with, this queen check just does nothing other than lose our queen. So do we have any other checks? Well, this bishop can check on g7. Now you might be saying, well, can't the king just take us? Yes, but then we have this check with our queen on g5. And the nice thing to see here is, because of this bishop, right, the king has no legal moves other than to go right back into the corner. And now without this pawn, the black king is actually fairly weak, right? He has no moves right now. And if we slide our queen back and give this diagonal check, the king just gets obliterated by the diagonals over here, and this is checkmate. So that's a nice little pattern. All right. Well, this is an interesting one. I get the feeling it's okay. Yeah, I think I see it. So with this one, we just have to be fast, because if we do anything other than a check, black is going to play maybe knight to d3, which I think leads to checkmate almost. If not, it's just very, very bad, right? Because it's a discovered check. We would be forced to move back. The queen could skewer our king and our rook. It's just a bad, bad situation. So every move we play has to be checked pretty much. Now, if we check on h4, the king just slides back, and I don't really see anything. We could repeat, but, then that's just a perpetual. If we check on g5, that's a similar situation. So in a lot of cases like this, you kind of need to give a check that will force the king forward. Okay, so the king is forced forward. Now he's more out into the open. So do we have any other checks? Well, we can actually go g4, sacrificing our pawn with a check. Is that a good move? I think it is, because after pawn to g4, something else this move does is it opens up the g file. So now our rook can come in and give a check, and now our rook cuts off this this file. Okay, this is nice. This is combining a lot of kind of topic or themes or patterns. We'd want to give a ladder mate with our queen. A ladder mate is where you have like a queen and a rook or two rooks that cut the king off, kind of like a ladder. The reason why it's called a ladder mate is because you can move them like a ladder, just like stepping down a ladder. We'd want to give that, but the king guards h6. So similar to earlier puzzles, how can we remove the king from guarding h6? Well, let's give this check, rook to g5. Now the king is forced away, and this is a checkmate. Okay. Like I said, these puzzles are starting to get hard. Well, the first thing I see is we have this fork, okay? Is it the right move? I'm not sure. But it's always good to just look for moves like that. I can't remember who said this. It's some grandmaster who said, whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. So sometimes, I see this fork. It's good, but maybe there's a better move. Unfortunately, we don't have queen to d7 checkmate because it's not checkmate because of this rook. Now that actually kind of gives me a clue, okay? And this is why I would suggest just looking at every check that you have, okay? And sometimes even talking through your thought process like I'm doing, right? Because I say, well, we don't have queen to d7 check because it's not checkmate because of the rook. And I stopped and went, wait, because of the rook, right? So if this rook were to move away from the d file, now we would have the checkmate, right? And then I see, well, this rook is the only piece defending the bishop on c3. And because c3 is not on the d file, this bishop isn't really defended, okay? The rook is what's called overworked. That's it, overworked. Getting my terms mixed up. Right? The rook is guarding the checkmate here and also guarding the bishop. Well, we can't do both things at once. If it was on the same file, it could, but, the rook will move away from the defense of either of those things and leave the other one undefended. And in this case, I think we can just take this bishop. Now, it's important to look through, well, what can black do? Obviously, rook takes rook is just checkmate, but, there's a common saying, this is not checkers, right? Black is not forced to take us. Is there some other move? And honestly, I don't really see anything else, right? Black doesn't have any checks that are good, at least, right? And we're actually, another thing this move does is it actually threatens checkmate on c8 with our rook, okay? So I'm pretty sure this is right, yeah, there we go. That's the correct answer. And that's why I see the fork with the queen, but I go, well, is there a better move? Because I also noticed we're down a rook. So if we fork and get a rook back, now we're just equal. So it's got to be something better than just that. Okay. Ooh, I think I see the right answer. Yeah, okay, this is nice. I think. Hold on. So, okay, I thought I saw the right answer, and now I'm not. No, because so our queen is under attack, obviously, and our knight, but black's king is pretty weak right now, out in the open. Is there anything we can do to exploit that? I'm not sure. The move I saw right at first was knight f3 check. Because if the queen were to take, we could give this check and then take the queen with our rook. But the problem is that our queen hangs in that line, so white would just take our queen, right? So now I think, well, do I give this check first? I don't think so, because then white just goes king to g2, and I don't see what we're doing there. Then our queen is under attack. It's not clear. Maybe you just slide over? this is something too. It's like that just doesn't feel forcing enough for a puzzle solution. And I mean, I know that maybe that's not the best way to think because that's not really applicable in an actual game. Um, but in the interest of trying to get a high Puzzle Rush score, in fact, I don't know. Maybe am I to the point where okay, I'm almost to the point where the check marks are being cropped off just the way that I did it. I didn't think I'd get this high. Um, okay, so um, so let's think about this. If check here, sorry, if check and the king moves here, then we just have checkmate. But white can just take our knight. So and we can give this check, but then white just moves the king anywhere really, and once we take the queen, then he just takes our queen with his pawn. So oh, okay. I was so focused on like how to use the knights to exploit the weakness in white's position. Oh, I'm yes, okay. I see the solution now. What we want to do is attack the weakness around white's king with our queen. So queen h3, and let me just double check. 'Cause I really want to try to get a higher score on Puzzle Rush with this. Um, so we double check queen h3. The point of this move is we're threatening queen g2 checkmate. White can't stop that threat simply by guarding this because the only way to guard it is queen to f3, but then we just take it with our knight. So the only way for white to deal with that is to take our knight. But in that case, I think then we have knight to f3 check because we're threatening a checkmate if white just moves the king, and so white would be forced to take our knight and we just take the queen. So I think this is yeah, this will be one where we end up a queen for two knights. That's good. All right. Well, oh, that's kind of. I mean, I think that I don't see anything better. Um, what I'm looking for is, well, our queen doesn't have any safe checks right now, but this bishop does. At first, it almost looks like checkmate, right? It looks like the king can't move anywhere, but white does have c4. However, oh, in that case, I think we can sacrifice the bishop. So white actually just moves the knight, but I think we just take with our bishop. And look at this. I think we sack the bishop. Hold on. Because if we sack the bishop and white takes, then we take back and it's checkmate. And if we take and white goes back, then we just take the free bishop. So, yeah, okay, great. All right. Oh, once again, this theme is coming back, right? If black's king was on h4, we could go rook h6 and it's checkmate. So we just force the king, and this pawn is stopping the king from going to g3. So we force the king down, and then we go rook h6 checkmate. Okay. Something about this one tells me it's going to do with the king being so out in the open, right? Like some sort of fork. So, well, I think the thing to notice is we are up a bishop. Whoa, what just happened? It just zoomed in really far. We are up a bishop and two pawns. So this one we just really need to try to defend the position because our king is really weak, right? Black might be threatening some kind of checkmate or something. If we take, black takes, and we block, and I don't really like this. Black can give a lot of checks. It might be a perpetual. It might lead to something with the rook coming. I think the correct move, I could be wrong with this, but I think the move is queen to e6. The reason I think that is if black moves to d8 in that situation, right? Okay, so we move here, black has 3 legal moves. And this is how you can start thinking about tactics and chess, is just like, I move here, black has 3 moves, let me go through each of those. If king to d8, then that's a really bad move. I can slide back, give this check, right? And it's actually a fork. And then I would be taking the rook, and it'd be a rook and a bishop and 2 pawns, which is really not good. So based on that, we can conclude black really has 2 moves that are worth trying, I guess. But both of those allow us to trade off the queens, which I think is going to be the solution to this puzzle. Yeah. And so then we trade off the queens, we relieve the pressure from our situation, and we're never going to get checkmated with 2 rooks in that position. 2 rooks and a queen can checkmate us, so it's just a good idea to stop that. Okay. This one, I mean, if a6 is not the right move, I'm going to be very surprised. It just looks so natural, right? a6, king there, pawn there, and the king can't, yeah. So this one seems pretty simple, right? I mean, I'll just double check just to make sure. We push a6, and black's king is not in time, and the rook can't get there as well, and this pawn is just too slow. Okay, this is kind of tricky. Because if we take the queen, then black will go here and win our pawn. And then black has 5 pawns to our 4. So I think the solution here is actually to promote. The reason why is, yeah, I think black was forced to take our rook because our rook was threatening to come up to a7 and the king is just way too weak. Okay. Okay, what have I said? Especially in the opening, if you can ever give a queen check on this diagonal here, or this one if you're black, if you can ever give a queen check and there's no pawns that can block, there's no pieces that can block, it's almost always the right move. And in this case, there's this nice little pattern. So we give this check, then we give, we don't want to give this check on f7 because then black can block, and well, that would actually be checkmate, but black can block with some other piece, and he's doing okay. He's still not great, I would say, but we want to give this check. Because what that check does is it forces the king to either of these squares, and then that is checkmate. There we go. Okay. So this might be a capture chain puzzle. What that is I take the queen, white takes the queen, I take the knight, white takes my knight, I take the bishop. We're not up any material there though, right? Oh, well, yeah. So look, take the queen. White is forced to recapture our queen. Then we just take the rook. And then if white moves the bishop away, we can save our knight, I'm sure, somehow. Yeah, we can take this pawn. And if white takes our queen, we take the bishop. So take this. And yeah, so white saves the bishop. And now we can take this pawn. That's the only safe move for the knight. There we go. Okay. Okay, I think I see this one. Our rook is under attack, but it's a pretty nice piece right now on the 7th rank, stopping the king from moving forward. In fact, if this rook was protected, we would have a mate in 2 with queen to g4 and then queen to f5 after the block. But because it's not protected, we don't have that. So I think what we need to do is just slide it out of danger. Yep. And then we can go here. Now, the queen coming to f8 complicates things a little bit, just because now... Oh, this is nice. This is nice. Okay, so we're going to give this check. And then we don't want to take with our queen because then black trades queens, and black is up bishop in this endgame, it looks like. We want to take with the pawn. Okay, now this is a really nice tactical pattern. The queens are staring at each other, but if we just take black's queen, then the king will recapture. But the problem is the king is the only defender of the queen. So, what do we know? Is there some way we can get the king to go away from the queen? We can go rook to e7. And what's cool about this move is even if black's king tries to stay by the queen, Then we go rook to f7. And if the king keeps moving, well, now we've skewered the king and the queen, so we can take the queen for free. So if king to f7, f6, then our rook can go here, and we force black to take us because we're skewering the king, the queen, and then we take the queen for free. But in this puzzle, black just took our rook, so we take the queen. Okay, that's nice. All right. This one is looking to be just a forced checkmate, right? I don't actually see how white can stop that. Now, white does have this check on h6 with the knight, but we can just slide away somewhere that we don't, have a check that can be given to us. I think, okay. The important thing, sometimes in these puzzles, there's a point where you get checked, and you have like 3 different moves with your king. Oh, that's a good thing that was the one that accidentally moved, because that was the right move. The reason for this is that any of these moves onto the dark squares, what I was going to say is whenever you have a choice, you need to try to figure out, well, why is, this square different than this square? In this case, like, either of these dark squares allow the bishop to give us a check and then swing back and block the checkmate. So by moving our king to h7, we avoid that, and now white is forced to just do this, desperado, desperado. Like there's times like that in puzzles where the puzzle thing will just force you to like that last move. It was so weird. Like the queen just took our pawn, we just take the queen, and it's that's it. It's kind of like, okay, that's weird. Like no human would do that. Okay, well this one is okay. We're up to what, 47 now. We're getting to the point where these puzzles are very layered. There's lots of different tactical motifs and tactical combinations that are combined into the same thing. In this case, there's a well-known pattern where a bishop that is attacking a knight. I mean, I don't know how I can even explain it. There's this pattern, this configuration of bishop and knight, where if we take the knight and white recaptures our knight, we can take the bishop. And the reason why this works is that if white takes the bishop, the knight can swing back and take the bishop, so we win a piece. However, in this case, the bishop is guarded. So if we went knight takes knight, white can just take our knight, we take the bishop, the knight takes the bishop, it's an even trade everywhere, and we're not up. In fact, our king is kind of weak and we're not as developed. I don't know who's winning in that position necessarily, but we're not crushing, right? So what we need to do first is we need to remove the defender of this bishop. We can do that by playing knight takes knight. Okay, wow. What a move. Like, yeah, sometimes the puzzle thing will just make the weirdest moves. Like, nobody plays this. I don't know, maybe people do, but the point was, of course, if white takes, then we take the knight. And once again, like I've gone through, if white takes the knight, now we take the undefended bishop and move one apiece. If white takes the bishop, then we take the bishop with the knight that just barely took that knight, and we're up a piece still. So in this case, I think white is trying to do some, like, bishop takes d7, but I think our king can just come up here. We can block with our pawns if we need to. I think we're safe to take the queen. Right, so we don't want to play queen takes bishop. Oh, no. Why did I go back? What happened? I accidentally went back. There we go, okay. Whew, that was weird. We don't want to play queen takes bishop because then the knight takes, we take, and then the rook takes the bishop. And this is completely equal. It's basically, it's going to be a draw pretty much. So we can just move our king to d7 though, and that's completely fine. Or e7, I think it was. Okay. All right. These are starting to get really involved. Okay. I'm looking for... Oh, wait. Okay, this one's kind of... Oh, wow. Okay. So, what I'm seeing is if we move our knight to f6, we're threatening queen to h7, which would allow us to skewer the king and the rook eventually and win the rook. And also, it's just a really good square for our knight. However, black can just take us, right, with their knight. That's not a knight move. There we go. But if black was to take us, we can take back with check. Black takes our pawn. So I'm picturing this position, and I'm thinking, do we have rook to c7? The idea, in my mind, of rook to c7 is we're attacking the queen, we're putting pressure on this pawn. See, I just don't know. I think this might be it, though. Okay. I'm going to do this, and if it's wrong, like, because I was thinking, well, do we, like, sacrifice our rook to try to get this knight in here? But it just doesn't work, right? Like, black can just take our rook. I don't see any other moves. Yeah. Now, the question is, does the move order matter, right? Sometimes it really matters. So the what I mean by that is, do we move our rook first, or do we take the knight first? Because my idea here is I'm going to be taking, I'm going to bring black's king to f6, I'm going to bring my rook here. Wherever the queen moves, I'm going to infiltrate here and threaten this pawn, and like, I mean, I guess, hold on, I guess, so take, oh, so look, take, here, not that, take, there, the queen moves, and in that case, the queen is attacking our rook, right? So maybe we go rook first, because then the queen doesn't have d6, because our pawn is still here. So if we went here, okay, but if we did go here, now the queen can take, and then capture here. So man, I just don't know. And you know, maybe I'm just totally missing some other tactic. I mean, black's rook is weak here. There's no obvious forks I can see, though, right away. I'm just going to go for it. Oh, okay. Interesting to look into what the right move was. I think it maybe was rook first. But then after queen takes... Yeah, I don't know. Okay, that's our first miss, but that's okay. We have 3. And still, 48 is a pretty high score. Okay. All right. I feel like this one's considerably easier. Right? The point is, we want to give this check and either take the knight or take it here once it drops back to c3. But right now the bishop's guarding it, so I think we push this pawn, push the bishop back, then we give this check, then we take... Wait. Oh, I was on autopilot. Oh, was there something with... Hold on. Can I go back here? I don't know if it's going to work with the recording. Okay, you see the... you can see the puzzle, so that works. So here, check there. Oh, yeah, what am I saying? You just push this pawn. Now, I totally was just like tunnel vision, like, oh, we get this check. I forgot, or check takes, and then here, and we fork. I forgot that white can just block with the bishop and guard there. Ah, that's disappointing. I should have seen that that's just a pin. Okay. And what about that other one right here? Let's see. So there takes... So, yeah, okay, it was rook here. Now, what about after queen... Here, let's see. Or can we analyze it? Ah, I don't want to do that. Let's see. Okay, analyze. Okay, maybe it's going to be... Oh, no, it looks okay. So there, knight there takes... Okay, so if we go here and black's queen goes... Oh! If black's queen moves away, the pawn is pinned. So we can go queen to g6. And if black's queen... That's checkmate. And if black goes here, then we have there, And that's checkmate in 3. Oh, wow. That's cool. I did not... I was so focused on, like, taking the knight with my pawn, bringing my queen in, threatening... I was even seeing some weird, like, if take... Uh, what was I seeing? I was seeing some, like, take their queen take their if like the rook came to guard, then I can like I was seeing some weird stuff where anyways, but yeah, I just totally missed that this pawn. So really the sacrifice is I'm gonna guard this rook coming in, or not guard, I'm going to remove the guard of this rook coming into c7. Okay, that's a good puzzle. See, like I'm saying, these puzzles are getting really, really complicated, and you have to really analyze them super deep. Okay. So immediately I notice that uh, the king cannot go to either f3 or h3, um, because then we can get this fork with the knight. So in fact, what if we go knight to e3 check? If the king goes back, it's a back rank checkmate. If the king comes forward, oh. If the king comes forward, then instead of forking the king and the rook, because then the king would take us, and then after we take the rook, then the king takes our rook. I'm feeling like Hikaru a little bit. All these arrows. Not really. He does like 10 times the amount. So if we check and the king comes forward, then we take this f2 pawn, because then whatever knight the king takes, we take this rook, and we're also threatening the bishop, so the king can't take, because then we take the bishop. And if the king, so after knight check here, okay, after knight check here, if the king goes forward, then we get this fork. Okay, yep, there, nice, okay. Well, what's wrong with just taking the knight? If we take the knight, oh. So if we take the knight with our rook, our queen is guarding this diagonal. Black might try to push this pawn to f3 to checkmate us, but then we just slide our rook over, and I think we're totally fine. Oh, not totally fine, though. Black has rook to d1, because our rook is pinned, and if we take, then it's mate. That's crazy, not that. There. So if we take the knight, and the pawn comes forward, oh, wait. But do we? Hold on. So if we take the knight and the pawn goes to f3 and we go rook g1 and the rook comes down here threatening checkmate, I think we have queen to d5 check. Because if the rook takes, it's no longer a pin and we take the queen, and if the rook comes back, we just block. And if the king moves anywhere, then we take the rook. I think that's it. Oh! Oh no! I must have missed something. Okay, let's see. Let's see. I thought I was so clever there. Okay. Man, what was the answer then? Oh, is it f3 first, maybe? I'm gonna try that. f3 first? No? Man, well then I don't know. I was seeing like stuff like queen back, but that just doesn't seem to do anything. Is it... Oh, really? Okay. Oh, that makes sense. We push up this pawn threatening checkmate. Okay, so it has nothing to do with this side of the board. I was just tunnel visioned into this half thinking, oh, we'll just take this knight there because, yeah, then... is it this? Okay. Now, I'm curious, though, to see why... Let's see, does this look okay? Oh, let me just turn that off. I clipped those parts for the puzzle rush, but it doesn't work for the analysis. I'm curious to see why this loses f3. Oh yeah, it's because rook g1 doesn't stop this at all. Because black can sacrifice and get a back rank checkmate. I should have seen that. See, because I saw if rook d1, yeah, all I saw was, oh, and we have queen d5. Oh, that's so cool. I saw this. Oh, look at this. This is so cool because, you know, the rook takes and we just take the queen. But I should have realized, no, black has this queen sack and then a checkmate. That's nice. And our move, our best move, e6, obviously if the queen takes now. Oh, wait. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. So, because we're threatening like two different checkmates here. Not that. Queen f7 and queen g7 with this, you know, sniper bishop back here defending. So that's just too many threats for black to deal with. Oh, that's nice. Man, I should have realized it was something with this bishop and the queen. Whoops. Once again, I was just so focused on, like, can we take this knight and get away with it? Well, anyways, that was quite a long video, but hopefully it was interesting or helpful to anyone who is wanting to get better at Puzzle Rush or get better at puzzles in general. We got to, let me on, there we go. We got to 49 in this. Bottom started getting cut off a little bit, which is, it's pretty good, but maybe I'll do another video and see if I can go any higher. But with that, have a nice day, everyone.